Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the June 21st, 2023 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We'll call the meeting to order, and we do have a quorum present today. Our first item of business is our consent agenda, and we've all reviewed that ahead of time. Did anybody have any items they want removed for further discussion?
If not, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We have a couple of items of old business today. First one is a mandatory referral to consider the abandonment of a portion of a public utility easement and a portion of Asher's Fork Drive, public right-of-way. Huddleston Steel Engineering is the applicant. Good afternoon, Mr. Aguilera. How are you?
I'm doing good, Madam Chair. Thank you. We have a very big crowd today, so I'll promise to make my presentation quick and be able to share a spotlight today.
All right.
So, our first item for our on our old business is mandatory referral application. This application was heard in the previous Planning Commission meeting. If you recall, there was some comments that were brought up that required it to be deferred so you all could get some further information on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize again just a little bit of the request, what was being requested with the mandatory referral, and then again talk about a little bit about the comments, and then Huddleston Steel will come up to address some of the concerns that were raised by a member of the public. So for this first item for our old business, again, is a mandatory referral request to request the abandonment of a portion of Asher's Fork Drive, public right-of-way, and public utility easement. In August 2020, a final plat was submitted and approved by the Planning Commission for Waits Creek Crossing Subdivision, Section 1, Phase 1A, that dedicated a portion of public right-of-way, Asher's Fork Drive, and as well as a 10-foot public utility easement. As it was depicted on the plat, I'm going to pull it up real quick here because there was a little confusion last time as well as to the location of it and everything. That portion of right-of-way was dedicated, you can see here, this area. That portion of right-of-way was dedicated with that 2020 plat, and was recently discovered that that portion of Asher's Fork Drive and the portion of the utility easement was in excess and was in conflict with the future lots that were dedicated with the Section 2, Phase 2. You can see portion right here, lots 60 and 61. And so in April 2023, the final plat for Section 2 was recorded, and it was determined again that there was a conflict with this excess right-of-way, and that the recording of these two lots could not move forward until, again, that right-of-way was properly abandoned, as well as that public utility easement. Huddleston Steel, on behalf of O'Brien Lloyd Ventures, requesting to abandon that excess portion of Asher's Fork right-of-way, as well as a portion of the adjacent 10-foot public utility easement, in order to record those two outstanding lots. Again, with the request, we reached out to utility departments and other city departments for comment or concern about this request. No other departments had any major concerns. However, Murfreesboro Water Resources did denote that an existing sewer main with the abandonment area was existing and will therefore require a 30-foot sanitary sewer easement to be retained and centered over the existing main prior to the requested abandonment. And further review, again, we provided that memo for you all so you could review that at your time. During that public meeting on the night of the Planning Commission, Mr. Seneker, a member of the general public, did raise some concerns about the drainage and some of the improvements from that. Staff was not able to answer some of those questions immediately because it did deal with the larger scale of the plans and kind of a little bit about how the overall subdivision was being built out. At that time, staff did request that we could get that further information for you all and to defer that, and so that we requested that Huddleston Steel provide documentation, some kind of response to Mr. Seneker's concerns, as well as provide a presentation or at least brief summary on how those are to be addressed. So Huddleston Steel, Mr. Bill Huddleston is here, I believe, if he wants to make a presentation real quick that addresses that. We have also included some of Mr. Seneker's questions about the responses that Bill Huddleston gave us to Mr. Seneker's concern, and so Bill will talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. That's perfect.
Good afternoon, Mr. Huddleston.
Good afternoon, Chair Jones, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Bill Huddleston with Huddleston Steel Engineering. I did talk to the Senekers yesterday. I've known Tim for quite some time, and explained to him the drainage scheme for this for this development. The entire development, and I'm not sure, yeah, this entire development drains to the detention pond that is downstream here before it empties into Spence Creek. So none of our development water goes onto the properties to the east. All of our water goes straight to that detention pond and then into Spence Creek. Also, along that eastern property line, on our property, we have installed a storm drain down through there, so anything that falls in that 30-foot buffer strip will also be carried to the detention pond. So, as I explained to the senators yesterday, all the development water drains to the pond and then to Spence Creek and not onto them. Be happy to answer any questions.
And was that, because we were under the impression that the drainage was quite different since the development had begun and had gotten worse than it had ever been in the past. So is that not the case?
That is not the case. The drainage is going to be better than it ever was because we're sending all the water from this property that doesn't just sit in wetlands, which is more the case in this southern end. All of our development water goes straight to the detention pond. Now, if they got something along the way temporarily during construction or something like that, I'm not aware of that. But now we've got the pond constructed and we've got that drainage pipe system constructed along the east line. So they're not affected by this.
You felt like Mr. Seneca was, he accepted your...
Yeah, he seemed good with it. He and his wife were both on the phone. He had her, and he was on the speakerphone, and I talked to them both, and they seemed good with the explanation. They asked if I would send them this plan and the plan that shows that pipe on the east side, and I did. So.
Okay. Appreciate that. You know, we spend a lot of time explaining to the public that normally development does nothing but improve drainage problems.
That's correct. We
don't want to be wrong about all those promises we make all the time.
That's correct. The projects we develop, we cannot and do not impact our neighbors.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Huddleston or any of the staff?
I appreciate your coming up here and explaining it, and I move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor state aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thanks again, Mr. Huddleston. All right. And our next item, we have item B, is Dutch Brothers Coffee. It's a site plan review of a 950-square-foot specialty restaurant with drive-through located on 0.8 acres, zoned commercial highway located at 1950 Old Fort Parkway. Dutch Brothers Coffee, LLC is the developer.
Ms. Green is on a well-deserved vacation this week, so I'm going to fill in for her with her presentations. First of all, I want to thank Joel for his hard work on that last item. I know he worked hard to make sure that those concerns were addressed, and contacting Mr. Seneca and Mr. Huddleston and making sure that was addressed, and so I appreciate his hard work on that. Dutch Brothers Coffee, you'll recall last month you reviewed the site plan, had concerns primarily with the traffic implications and the design with regards to traffic there, and so you voted to defer it at the May 17th meeting, voted for a 2-month deferral to the the July 19th meeting. And since that time, staff has been in discussions with the design team and the applicant, and they are actually requesting a little bit of additional time to continue working on the design. And so what I would like to do is to request that either Mr. Brick Murphy, who is representing the project, or Ms. Grace Wooten from Reagan Smith, who's also representing the project, if one of them would come to the podium, and since the deferral was consented for 2 months by the applicant and then made and voted on to be 2 months by the Planning Commission, I think we will need their consent, which they've given in writing, but I think it would be good to get that on the record to defer it for some additional time.
Thank you, Chairman Jones, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Brick Murphy, and we would request, I'm just confirming that we're requesting a deferral for additional time to work on the traffic. So this is on the record.
Okay, and do we need a specific time or just a general deferral?
I think that the ordinance gives us the ability to defer for 180 days. So I think it would be a 180-day deferral from last month's meeting, but it would be our anticipation that we would, if all goes as hoped by the design team, that it would be back on the agenda on August the 16th or whenever the day meeting is in August. Mr. Murphy, did I?
That seems right.
Okay.
Okay, so just requesting motion to defer
For 180 days from May 17th.
180 days from May 7th.
I'll move for a motion to defer 180 days from the previous meeting's date.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And we're moving on to the GDO portion of our agenda. So looks like Mr. Blomley's going to be busy covering for Ms. Green here. First item we have is Robert Rose Village East Lot 10 tidal wave. It's the final design and site plan review of a 4,800 square foot vehicle wash located on 1.3 acres, zoned commercial highway in GDO 1, located along Medical Center Parkway. W4 Development LLC is the developer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was hoping this was one of those months where she'd have like 2 items on the agenda, but just my luck.
That's right.
I guess I can't complain because I was just on vacation and missed a meeting. So at any rate, the first item under the Gateway Design Overlay District section of the agenda is for the tidal wave car wash that you saw for initial design review last month. And you'll recall that the plans were generally in good order at that meeting. There were a few things that were discussed. One primary thing was the design of the mullions on the side of the building facing the interior of the site. The applicants requested that the horizontal mullions be removed from those windows because it kind of posed some issues when they washed the inside of the windows. So they didn't have any issue with the vertical mullions in the windows, but the horizontal they requested to be removed. Planning Commission said that on final design review they'd like to see that to be able to make an educated judgment on what they thought about those mullions. So we have in the I've actually got the latest elevations here. Let's see. So there we go. All right, and so if the design team and the architect could come up and kind of go through the change that was made with the architecture.
I'm Tom Morgan, I'm the architect. They said you were tougher than Margaret Ann. I started to pack my stuff and go home. So you can hardly tell the difference, but you can see some horizontal mullions on that right-hand tower that is not where the wash bay is. So it's horizontal mullions like that were in the 1, 2, 3, 4, about 9 windows that are in the wash bay, and in that drawing the horizontal mullions are not there. like I said, it hardly makes a difference. There was also a request to change our 3-foot water table to a 2-foot water table, and we changed that. So those were just some minor changes to the architecture look. We'd already done all the screening and adding dormers and all that, so it's just down to those 2 minor items, I think.
And let's see, here is the front elevation of the building. You can see that they have not removed the horizontal mullions from the front elevation, which is what will be facing Medical Center Parkway. It's just on the side that's interior to the site.
Which is where the wash bay is. The soap gets on the windows and it starts looking really bad if they don't have these automatic sprayers that spray down them at the end of the day to get the soap off.
Okay.
And with regards to the site plan, because as Margaret Ann always likes to say, initial design review is primarily about architecture, and final design review is a final review of the architecture, but it's also a review of the site plan. There is one item that I wanted to bring to your attention that I think that we will have no problem working with the applicant during the prior to permit process. Well, the site plan's not in the packet. Anyway, the bypass lane for the queuing spaces wraps around and dumps back into where the vacuum stations are. And the lane that serves the vacuum stations is one way. What we would like to do is to work with the applicant and to better channelize traffic right there to make sure that it does not go the wrong direction into the area with the vacuum stations. And I think they have some concerns about making sure that's designed in such a way as to not impact their site too much. I think that we can achieve what we need to achieve with minimal impact to their site, but just making sure that we channelize that traffic in the direction that it needs to go. And so we would ask that in your motion to approve subject to all staff comments, that you include that comment, and I think the applicant may have some thoughts on that, but I think we can work through that.
Civil engineer's here if you want to talk to him.
And is that really the only thing on the site plan?
I think there are some other minor things that can be worked out prior to permit, but that's the only thing that I think that they pushed back on a little bit in their response. But I think that we can come to a mutually beneficial design there.
So I would think as a planning commission, we could make a motion on the final design and that we are going to leave the site plan review to the staff to work out? Is that what we're doing? We're not looking at a site plan.
But if you approve it subject to staff comments, I think that would take into account that, because it's one of the staff comments.
I might add that bypass lane is rarely ever used. I mean, it's just for emergency, somebody decides they don't want to go through the wash. I mean, it shouldn't cause a lot of traffic.
But other than that, the plans are generally in good order, and of course, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the mullions, or lack thereof.
Mm-hmm. I don't have a problem with changing the mullions down the side. I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think the mullions look fine. I think if it helps them operationally make it look like a better clean windows all the time, I think it's fine to do it. If there are no other comments, I'll make a motion to approve subject to all staff comments and that they work out the site flow issues.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor state aye.
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 Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have fountains at Gateway Phase 2, mass grading plan review located on 8.1 acres, zoned MU and GDO 3, located along Medical Center Parkway, Hearthstone Properties developer. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a mass grading plan for the next phase of the fountains. And so recently, the city transferred this flag lot. You can see the area where my cursor is, and there has a little flagpole appendage down to Medical Center Parkway. That area was transferred, I think, at the end of last year from the city to Mr. Graby. And so Mr. Graby is preparing plans for Phase 2 of, I can't keep the phase number straight on the fountain. Is it Phase 2?
Phase 2.
I know there are several of the phases have combinations of numbers and letters, and it's hard to keep track of. At any rate, so they're preparing plans for that, and because, at least for the time being, those phases are going to remain on separate lots of record. And separate lots of record create expectations for certain things like parking and landscaping for each individual lot to be able to stand on its own. Mr. Graby is in the process of preparing a PUD request for the fountain's development. Because of financing reasons, the parcels, at least for the time being, have to stay as separate lots. So the plans that we have before us today, simply a mass grading plan to prep the site in advance of that future Phase 2. So there's no site layout, there's no utility plan, it's just purely mass grading. If it were not in the GDO, it would be reviewed and approved administratively. It doesn't require initial design review and final design review, just one vote today. The plans are generally in good order. Be happy to answer any questions. As I mentioned, in the future, we would expect to be bringing to you a PUD zoning request for this development, but that's still in the works right now. Mr. Graby is here, as is Mr. Preston Ayer, the civil engineer on the project. Okay. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions regarding the mass grading plan?
If there are none, I move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next, we have item C is the Clary Park Lot 2. It's 711. It's initial design review of a 4,874 square foot convenience store and 3,333 square foot gasoline canopy on 1.8 acres, zoned CH and GDO 1, located along Medical Center Parkway and Willow Oak Trail Southeast. Southeast Murfreesboro Medical LLC is the developer. And Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is kind of a redo of a plan that you approved last year, I believe. For property on the corner of Medical Center, Willow Oak, and Robbie Corlew. So it's a triple frontage lot. 711 was approved on this site by you in 2022. They have decided that they want to kind of revise the site design a little bit. And the primary revision is that they wanted the gas canopy on the Medical Center Parkway side instead of the Robbie Corlew side. So they're actually reversing the original approved plan that they presented had the gas canopy on the back side. Here the gas canopy would be on the front side, which is not unlike the other gas stations that are along Medical Center Parkway, the Thorntons, the Racetrack. The gas canopy is on the Medical Center Parkway side of those developments. The convenience store the footprint of the convenience store has shrunk in size a little bit. The canopy design, they basically copied the canopy design from the gas station that is closer to that's under construction closer to the interstate on the opposite side of Medical Center Parkway that y'all reviewed about a year ago as well. Spoke with Mr. Brick Murphy before the meeting, who's representing the developers in this effort, and he said that the same restrictions on signage that were placed on the original development, that they are committing to that, that they've been working with David Ives on having those restrictive covenants drawn up, and they'll mirror those covenants that were committed to at the last Planning Commission approval for this development. If the design team could go ahead and come to the podium, go through the architectural design and the site design, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, and the design team as well. If y'all could introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Morgan Salzman. I'm with Kinley Horn for the civil design team.
And I'm Callie Freese with MJM Architects on the architectural side.
So if we can get that pulled up on your computer as well, if you mind scrolling down to that item. Thanks.
Mr. Warner, which item are we on again?
We are on item 5C,
5C,
the
okay.
Clary Park 7-Eleven.
So I have the right area.
Usually Ms. Green's up there, and she's already got it pulled up. I didn't take into account the fact that I would be sitting up here.
Okay. So here's the site design and then the architecture.
We can't all be as good as Miss Green.
It's true. If there's anything that I've learned in my 18 years of knowing her, it's that.
So as you mentioned, the biggest change is we flipped the canopy in the building. And one of the kind of nuances of that was making sure we had enough space equivalent to the racetrack down the street from the property line to the canopy. So that was one of the big things that we discussed in terms of the site. And then we did add a speed table on that left side of the plan to kind of help with pedestrian traffic there. Pedestrian traffic from all sides was something else that we discussed pretty heavily. But I do not believe there are any large outstanding comments from a site plan perspective as of now.
If y'all could go over the architectural design as well, that should be in the packet as well. You should scroll down.
Yeah, I scrolled down on here.
Oh, is it on your screen but not on, okay. Yeah, if the cable department could change the view to the podium screen.
There we go. Okay, so this design is similar to the previous design that was approved. However, the building is approximately 1,000 feet smaller. So what we kind of took was the original design and essentially just shortened it. The end sides on Willow Oak Trail and then the side that does not face the street are the exact same. The difference mainly is the choice of materials here. Per Margaret Ann's comments and the staff comments, we have chosen more earth-toned materials in the brick to match some of the other buildings and developments down Medical Center Parkway, as the previous design was much more bright and white.
And would you mind scrolling down to the canopy elevations as well?
And as far as the canopy goes, we did match all on the columns, the brick, with the same materials as we're putting on the building, and added decorative brackets similar to what is on the racetrack down the road as well.
And is the wall sign that we see on the corner there, is that's part of what will be constructed?
I believe the Clary Park sign is part of a different development. That was something that was given to us.
Do you see what I'm talking about, Matthew?
In the center here.
Yes.
For the master development.
Yeah, it's up for the master development.
I guess the other question is, which landscape plan are we looking at? There are two different ones.
The bottom one, it was just removing the trees to show you the building and the canopy
Okay.
itself, but the top one is what the landscape plan will be.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments?
I think I like it better.
Yeah, I actually like this one better. The other one was much more pronounced.
Pretty much walkability behind, for what's going to be behind it as well, so I think it's a pretty good plan.
We thought one of the benefits of this design was the fuel canopy aspect of it, getting that away from the residences that were going to be to the rear of the site that were going to be in Clary Park.
Agree.
Okay.
If there are no other questions or comments, I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to all staff comments.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. All right, next we are moving on to our plats and plans. The first item we have is West Lawn Commercial East Lot 5. It's the Hendricks Medical Office Building. It's a site plan review of a 27,660 square foot medical office building located on 1.9 acres, zoned PUD, located along Veterans Parkway and Blackman Road. Hendrick Dental Specialists is the developer. Oh,
No, I'm not doing it.
it's not going to be Mr. Blomley.
Oh, it is. Miss Rush is just,
Yeah.
I'm just scrolling.
yes. Thank you, Miss Rush.
I'm not here.
So this is for a medical office building, Lot 5 of West Lawn Commercial East. West Lawn Commercial East is the commercial subdivision located on the east side of Veterans Parkway, across from where the St. Thomas and the other medical office buildings are being built. This property is on the corner of Veterans Parkway and the realigned Blackman Road. Blackman Road, as you know, with this development is being realigned to intersect with the recently completed realignment of Shores Road. And so that will be a signalized intersection. This is for a medical office building. The plans are in generally good order. We would ask that you make any approval subject to all staff comments. But I'd like to ask Mr. Matt Taylor to come up to the podium, go through the design, both civil and architectural. Even though this site has to meet GDO standards because it's in the West Lawn Plan development, and that was a commitment that the developers made, there's no requirement for initial and final design review. So it's just one vote today on this.
Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Matt Taylor of SEC. I'm also accompanied by Jim DeGraff, the architect on the project as well. So, as Mr. Blomley said, it is Lot 5 of the West Lawn East commercial development. I think it's the second site plan you've seen, the first being Liberty Financial, which I think recently started construction, which is further to the right of this page. It's on the other side of Lot 6. So it is a 3-story medical office building. Some of this space will be taken up by Dr. Hendricks. The rest will be speculative at this time. And so we do have one access point off of Veterans Parkway. That'll be a shared access point between our lot and Lot 6. And then we also have one proposed access coming off of the alley that is getting constructed with the overall subdivision infrastructure. Our building, as Ms. Green likes to say, we already got 4-sided architecture here, so we really got two well-pronounced fronts facing both Blackman Road as well as Veterans Parkway. We've got pedestrian connections to both of those roads as well. Our formal open space is located out along the realigned Blackman Road. We're doing some pergolas and seat walls out there. I think that'll add a nice feature and Then architecture, very nice architecture. I think it's different, but it certainly complies with our design guidelines and our GDO requirements. Kind of reminds me of Redstone building a little bit with that strong glass on that one side. It does have a rooftop feature on the back of the building that will face back toward that alleyway as well. So it is primarily brick and stone with a little bit of ACM panel as accents around the building. So we did have a material board. I don't know that got brought downstairs today.
It may not be all in one piece, but
That's some strong material, though.
So, but we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
it's actually one that held up.
Somebody else's got broken. It's a nice looking building. Modern. Okay, and so this is our site plan review. And like landscaping will come later?
The landscaping is a part of the package before you, and I think everything is in pretty good order. Any outstanding comments, in our opinion, can be handled during the prior to permit review. But I think in general, the plans are in pretty good order.
So that's the landscaping plan you have right there.
What I have up is the site plan. I think the agenda has only the master plan, site, and then the building. It doesn't have any of the landscape. I would assume y'all have the full package inside of your...
The landscape plan's not in the agenda package. It was submitted and reviewed, but
Okay.
due to the size of the PDF, we try to cull out some...
It's a big package in general.
Yeah.
So just as long as it's been reviewed and y'all
Yes, ma'am.
comfortable with it. Okay.
Mr. Barbie's given it the good once-over.
I'm sure he has.
He just gave us a thumbs up.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Barbie. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. So next, we are moving on to item B, which is the West Lawn Pavilion Lot 3, Wells Fargo. It's a site plan review of a 2,668 square foot bank with drive-through located on 1.5 acres, zoned PUD, located along Veterans Parkway. Wells Fargo Bank is the developer. Are you taking this, Mr. Blum?
Yes, ma'am. This is across the street from the site plan that you just reviewed. Here's the vicinity map. The arrow's pointing to it. This is the location of the Hendricks office building, and this is the location of the proposed Wells Fargo. This is actually an out parcel of the West Lawn Pavilion development. West Lawn Pavilion is anchored by a Publix grocery store, or will be anchored by a Publix grocery store. Directly to the south of the proposed Wells Fargo is a McDonald's. Plans have been approved for that McDonald's, and their permits have just recently been released. And so the Wells Fargo, and this would be, were it not in the West Lawn PUD, this would qualify for administrative review due to its scale and other factors. But the plans are in good order. But since it is in the West Lawn PUD and architecture is required to meet GDO standards, what I'd like to do is invite the architect to go over the architecture of the proposed bank building.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Crutchfield with Timmons Group. I'm actually the civil engineer. I also got Tom Chapman and Adil Akil with SG Design with me that'll go over the architecture. We did spend a lot of time working with Margaret Ann and staff to go and understand the PUD and some of the requirements with the GDO and how they apply to this site, getting the building situated and sited correctly on the site, maintaining existing access points, and having the correct flow around the building. We spent a lot of time tackling some of those requests and challenges. We also incorporated a lot of the formal open space requirements that are listed in the GDO, and spent a lot of time working on the landscaping as well. But I won't bore you with the site stuff. We've got the architects that'll be happy to go through a lot of the iterations and changes they dealt with Margaret Ann on.
Hi, and I'm Tom Chapman, the architect on the project, and obviously with a lot of help from Ms. Green, we have modified very much the standards for Wells Fargo to totally conform to the finishes, the verticality, the massing, and you know, all the architectural features for a pretty small building to break the massing down and create a very nice facility that we hope fits well within your community. We've gone to all brick with stone. All the materials are very much matching the development. We've got the base on the building and some detail work with the brick, and we've met the void spaces and whatever as far as the requirements for that. And I think it speaks fairly well for itself. If you've got questions or want any more detail, that's a quick synopsis.
And we as staff have nothing to add, and we would just ask that any approval be made subject to staff comments.
Can I make really one just very minor comment, I think, on the site plan? Just at the point where you've got the traffic that can enter the site facing in, you know, against the drive-through lanes, it'd be pretty obvious, I'm sure, but wouldn't you make that right-in arrow, maybe make it a curve so they just make it obvious they need to turn in and turn right? Like if there were no cars in the drive-through or anything.
Yes, that's definitely a good point, and Wells Fargo does pay very good attention to signage and striping on the site, so we will get that detailed out so it's crystal clear which way we need to go there.
It's a nice-looking building again, and appreciate all the work to meet all our little guidelines to stay in line with our GDO. We appreciate it. Any questions, comments?
If there are none, I'll move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Motion and second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks again.
With the additional striping and signage as needed to direct traffic.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, that was in it.
Great.
That was in there, right?
You didn't hear that?
All right, our next item C is Viewpoint Site Plan for 171 single-family attached townhome units on 22.1 acres, zoned PRD and RM16, located along Veterans Parkway and Otter Trail, the BTR Group developer. Ms. Rush, hello.
Oh, hello again. All right. So yes, this project is called Viewpoint, and it is located along the eastern side of Veterans Parkway and west of Otter Trail and north of Kingdom Drive. It is, the applicant is BTR Group, and the proposal is for 171 attached single-family residences and a clubhouse on a total of 22.11 acres. The zoning for this is RM16 and PRD. So as we know, the RM16 zoning district allows apartments by right. They are not proposing apartments or rentals. They are proposing townhomes for sale. The clubhouse portion is on this part of the property, and that is the part that's zoned PRD. That came through a few years ago, knowing that there was a need for a clubhouse if apartments were to be developed on the property, and then that would be the location. So the current owner has purchased that piece as well, and will be constructing a clubhouse associated with that project. Going to go to... Matthew said it's on, is it on the desktop or opened
Yeah,
up?
it's one of the 3 PDFs that's on the taskbar on the bottom.
Oh, I see it, thanks. So since the agenda had gone out, we did get new renderings, and I did want to show that to you all today. So the elevations are generally the same. Nothing has changed. So it's predominantly a gabled roof. They do have a wraparound porch on the end units. It is rear entry, 2-car garages for each of the units. There's a lot of windows. There's windows on the sides. The development will be private streets as well as private alleyways, and the driveways will accommodate 2 cars each. So each unit will have the ability to park for 4 cars. There's also guest parking that is proposed. I don't have the site plan up. I could do that on this one. So there are several sheets that comprise the site plan, but on the site plan sheets, you can see that on the private streets, there is guest parking that is throughout the development. There's some near this pocket park area, and most of them are actual parallel street spaces. They're located along all the streets. They are also proposing a trash compactor, and they're intending to do a third-party trash collection service where the trash will be collected from the back of the alley by the garages. Each will have their own individual cart. But because this is bulk zoning and the zoning ordinance does require a compactor to be included in this type of a development, they are also going to be installing a trash compactor for use in the property. All the setbacks are met. There is type D buffer where it's contiguous to residential. There's single-family residential to the north. Near the clubhouse, there's residential to both the north and the south sides of that piece. And then further to the south is commercial, and there's some buffer there as well. Getting back to the...
Can I ask you, Ms. Rush, on that page we were just looking at, did you show us where the compactor is going to be?
Let's see if I can... Right there.
Yes.
Next to the dogs.
Okay.
Can I ask you another question, Ms. Rush?
Sure.
Did you say that they're hiring a private trash service to collect the trash from all the residents and take it over to the compactor, or the residents will have to take the trash over to the compactor themselves?
I can tell you what I've heard, but they're applicants' representatives here, so maybe they can respond directly. So we can do it now or at the end of the presentation?
It's fine. I can wait.
Okay. All right. So as you can see from the renderings, they do have along the private street sidewalks, curbs. That is what changed from the attachments that were included in the agenda packet. We had renderings that had not included the curbing, so we wanted to make sure that you were aware that there is curbing included. There are also sidewalks that extend from the front door to the side, walkways that extend from the front door to the sidewalks. With this density and site layout, because it's not apartments, it is more of an urban design, so you can see that it's kind of a short distance between that front door to the sidewalks, but that is what the applicant is desiring for this development. They do have a little bit of a variety to the roof line. It's relatively flat, but there is some slight variations. Let's see if I can... You see on the elevations, you see like between two units, and it's most likely due to the topography that's out there. There's some slight rolling grades, and so it looks to me like the building pads are graded as the grade goes up, which then creates a variation to your roof line. So in terms of the clubhouse does meet the program book design in terms of square footage. It's a little over 6,000 square feet. The design is consistent. The amenities inside the clubhouse include several things like exercise room, rec room, business center. It's got the mail kiosks. Outside amenities are the swimming pool, fire pit, barbecue area, as well as the dog park. And there's also some open play fields. So staff is recommending approval of this site plan made subject to all staff comments. And I wanted to get to the floor plan. And there's the floor plan of the clubhouse that shows all the variety of amenities that would be interior. So Mr. Taylor is representing the applicant. The applicants are here as well, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or they can as well.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. Matt Taylor of SEC. I've got the architect, Ms. Margaret Butler, here as well as my clients, Mr. Mac Furlow. What was your question again, Mr. Salas?
So my question, I thought I heard that they were hiring a private trash service to collect the trash and take it over to the compactor. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
And are there, and I'm sure you know this, Mr. Taylor, or staff can answer, like when we have private streets like this, is the width determined by the developer or by staff? Are there requirements when we have the private streets that...
All of our streets...
Close, when the buildings are this close, I'm just worried about like the speed of the cars going through there.
Yes, ma'am. And so the street widths comply with the city's subdivision regulations. So it's same width as you'd have in a normal subdivision. We've done a few things here to try to help with that speed. Is we've brought the homes closer to the street, try to make it feel a little tighter. We've got a strong landscape package, street trees. We've also got on-street parking. All those things tend to go in and try to restrict that a little bit. We've also tried to keep most of our streets, the blocks, much shorter, or to have curves as you get into those 500 or 600 foot range on the straight stretches.
You said you brought them closer to the street. We're still meeting the setback requirements.
So with the private streets, we don't necessarily measure setbacks from the street itself. I think all of the primary structures are all set back, I think, about 15 feet from the sidewalk. And then we have front porches that we've added to these that are varying in depth from like 5 to 7 feet. And so we've got, at least 3 to 5 feet of green between the porch and the sidewalk, and then between, about 15 feet between the porch back to the structure itself. In most of our cases, we've probably got a couple of places that are a little tighter, but the only place where we have what I would call a true setback on our buildings is going to be along Otter Trail, and we fully comply with that setback there.
There was a note about there being one entrance instead. That's already been...
We've actually got 2 entrances. We've got one on Otter Trail and then one out on Veterans Parkway. And both of those, we work closely with staff to have both of those. I think everybody wanted more than one way in and out, especially with the school being right there. They didn't want our residents to have to go on Veterans to get back to Otter if we had a child or something there. But we also didn't want those to be a straight shot either. So you'll notice we've got several curves and bends and stops to try to not necessarily prevent, but discourage people from cutting through.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's one entrance off of Veterans, which...
And we responded to that. We only have one entrance. It's just set up with kind of that median in the middle of it. And so it's one-way traffic on each side.
Mr. Taylor, you're making provisions for a stub to the commercial to the south, too, correct?
Yes, sir. And so we worked, let me find...
I think the sheet isn't in there that shows that. I looked.
You don't think we had the master plan in there, Matthew?
I don't think so.
Okay. So, yeah, I think you're exactly right. But to the south end of this project, we create a stub into some remaining property that Swanson will retain after the purchase. And I think the intention from staff there is to provide another connection, probably line up with Moreland Lane down there, to provide a third way in and out of this property as well.
And Ms. Butler, did you have any specific comments we need to hear about?
Margaret Butler with McCarty Holsapple McCarty, the architect for the project. And no, I'm here to answer any questions. I think Ms. Rush presented it well. I'll just note that, the buildings are, through her guidance, are stepping, as she mentioned, through the topography as the site goes up and down, but we're also moving the units forward and backward to kind of break that front facade so it's not flat, and then using a variety of architectural elements like dormers and different elements that shed roofs and things that would try to break that up, and then use a varied color palette so that it doesn't look like a lot of the same, and make it as varied as we can.
Okay.
But I can answer any questions you may have.
Okay. And the street trees and everything that are in there, they're just every so often, or they set in certain... Just be varied.
So with any of our parallel spaces, we have islands worked in, landscape islands with those, and so we'll have street trees inside of those landscape islands, but we also have street trees that are going to be along each of the building frontages, interspersed between sidewalks that connect there with the porches. I don't know the spacing necessarily, but they do have a regular where they can put those.
All right, any other questions or comments?
Are those standard height and width double garage doors in the back?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
The garages have been designed to comply with the city zoning ordinance for a width of 2 cars and on both the depth and the width.
Okay, thank you.
And as Ms. Rush said, we do have visitor parking spread throughout the development. Some of that is in the parallel spaces, some of that is 90-degree spaces at some of the amenity areas, some of it's at the clubhouse, so it is well dispersed throughout the site.
Do you know approximately how many guest spaces you have?
Yes, ma'am. We have 116 spaces spread throughout the site that are not associated with a garage or a driveway.
Okay.
So we exceed the city's required by approximately 160 spaces.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Other questions or comments? All right.
If not, I'll move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all. Our next item D is Rutherford Warehouse Murphy property, site plan for 4 industrial buildings totaling 703,200 square feet of warehouses on 87.7 acres, zoned heavy industrial and G1 located along, that's that new General 1 thing, I can't get it. General Industrial, right?
Yes, GI.
Industrial, GI, located along South Rutherford Boulevard, Distribution Realty Group developer. Ms. Smith, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair Jones and Commission. This particular property, as you mentioned, is on South Rutherford. As you're looking at the sheet on the screen above, CSX Railroad is in the north-south direction. South Rutherford is your east-west. The red represents the single property, which is generally bounded by city limits on most of the sides, with the exception of this small kind of triangular area here, and then the area directly to the east known as the Hoover property. This particular project is looking at putting 703,200 square feet maximum amount of warehouses on the 87 acres. In most of those areas, for parking purposes, we've anticipated a 10% office space out of those in each of the buildings, with the exception of Building C. And Building C is the one that's the smallest of the buildings. And looking at the drawing on the screen above, you'll notice I've turned on the floodplain layers. There are some wetlands, floodplains and floodways on portions of the site, which they have looked at, already working with other outside entities for those permits and designing the project site to avoid, in most cases, those special areas. The other thing to note on this particular map, you'll notice this very faint orange circular line that is out of our MTP, our Major Transportation Plan 2040, that looks to have some kind of connection back to Broad that would not be directly for Rutherford and Broad, because currently that intersection, as well as the Rutherford at Church intersection, do have a lot of traffic currently. So staff did evaluate the engineering department, looked at various alternatives and whether any of those needed to be on the project site themselves, and determined really that at some point maybe a street that goes through this section and ties back into Broad Street would probably be more appropriate. So we did look at one of their streets on this side to be able to have a connection back to that at some point in the future. In looking at the actual plan set, you'll notice this colorized drawing here, which I'll blow up a little bit. I can go in the right direction. Shows an anticipated phasing, which what they're looking at is their 2 access points are here and here off of Rutherford, and those would be private roadways, as well as a roadway that comes through the back of the project and accesses that first parcel closest to the CSX rail line. And what we're looking at, there is a filed jointly with this particular project is a preliminary plat that will be our next item. But in that particular drawing, we have a similar discussion and making sure that this access way here is able to be shared by the adjacent neighbor. So we did also incorporate that into the plan set. As you're looking at each of the projects, you'll notice there's 2 different scales. For those of us who are not engineers, I preferred to see each building on one page so you weren't trying to piece together 4 pages. So this is at a little bit different scale, but it shows how they're accessing, how the trucks are able to get through the site. And as you'll notice in this particular layout, here at the corners of the buildings, they've put in space for offices, And then they have the option at the future is should there be additional splitting up of the property, that they could accommodate more offices in those front sections. The other thing that they did is looking at these interiors. If you look at all the buildings, all of the truck docks are faced to the interior of the site to try to lessen the impact kind of to the street side and then to the residentials that are north on the opposite side of the Creek River area. So this is a 975-foot building, which you can see, and you'll see in some of the future drawings how that will impact. And then, of course, the portion that faces towards South Rutherford. Building B is a little bit smaller building, but takes up the most and is most visible from South Rutherford Boulevard, and we'll go over some of the setbacks in some subsequent drawings. There's that building C that we talked about. This is the one that really shows very well those two access points that touch down to Rutherford. One is in line with the adjacent property across the street, West Rock, I believe it is. And this other drive approach is directly adjacent from the Husky Truss properties, and that's just to, again, make a better traffic flow in those areas. And then here you'll notice, and is included in our staff comments but is not submitted during this cycle, is a mandatory referral for an abandonment of our sewer easement. There is an existing line in the ground at this location that they are proposing to reroute outside of that building footprint. So we wanted to make sure that it was shown here on the site plan. And then you'll also notice here some of the wetland features that again are shown on the project site where they're trying to do avoidance, but in this area where the drive aisles are, cannot avoid that particular component. So they are working on those particular elements with other entities. Building D, that's the building that's actually furthest away or into the site and is adjacent. Once you look on the opposite side of this river, there's a residential development pretty far distance away. And again, those docks are facing the interior, they're not facing the exterior of the site. And again, all of the buildings incorporated offices into the corners of each of the buildings, and the larger buildings have opportunities for more of those improvements. There was a traffic impact analysis that was done for the project. We had an initial one done about a month ago. We just got an updated one a few weeks ago. That is addressed, it says more comments to come, but generally when engineering department reviews and approves any improvements to our street systems, they'll look at those components within that traffic study and make sure that the recommendations are implemented with the project. So here it does show some right-hand turn lanes into both of those drive approaches and center turn striping along South Rutherford. In looking at the entirety of the project, they are including a tree preservation plan, which is, I'm just making sure this is the right, existing tree canopy to remain. If you saw the original aerial, there's quite a few trees on this particular property, as well as we have one of the sewer mains that goes through the property. But what they're trying to do is on the periphery is keep as many of those trees as possible. But because it is adjacent to RM County zoning, in a good portion of it, they would be required to have a type D as in David buffer, which is a 15-foot. And landscape comment has been such as if there's, not enough tree coverage in those areas, because we do not have a tree survey at this point in time, that they would meet the standards of those type D 15-foot buffer. And where it's adjacent to the city's residential zoning, those areas would be a required 20-foot buffer in those easements. Going on to landscaping plan, you can see here, this is an overall master landscape plan. In the full plan set, which is about 110 pages, we didn't want to share all that with you, but we did share, here's the master plan for landscaping, which basically includes perimeter plantings on all 4 of the parcels, that buffer landscaping we talked about, and as we worked with the applicant, some additional evergreen tree plantings adjacent to Building A to soften that building a bit. And then, of course, any of the parking areas for like passenger parking would require the shrubbery plantings along the adjacent ways. They did submit a photometric plan, which kept all of the project site within the parameters so that you're not overly spilling onto adjacent properties. This particular drawing here is part of the architect packet, just provides very high level where things are for the building, because it's sometimes a little hard to see with all of the engineered information, but you can see, and this is in the true north position. And this is one of the renderings of what a typical building would look like, where you have those office components at the corners. This one would be an example of one of the larger buildings where you have these breaking down of the building. Normally, our design guidelines talk about breaking the building every 40 feet. In industrial buildings, that's really not probably the best tactic, and when we've looked at Prologis in the past or some of our other very large-scale buildings, we've looked at it really more in the context of the building massing and the size, what makes sense so that you don't have these blank walls all the way through. This is proposed tilt-up concrete building that they do provide scoring details, and then where you see these horizontal elements, those are breaks in the buildings as you go through, and then this is a rendering of what you might see on that side that faces the truck docks. This particular exhibit, staff wanted to look at to get an idea of proximity of the site and how the context is. It's really hard to see the numbers. I'm going to go to my handy-dandy page. So the distances here, you'll notice this is the top of the bridge at Rutherford Boulevard. So when you go over the top of that railroad, you know, there's a huge difference in grades between there, and what that grade is versus where the top of the buildings will be. So this building A, as you're sitting at the top of the bridge, will be slightly higher than the top of the bridge, meaning you won't be looking down into the roof line of that building. And the building, if I recall, is set back pretty far distance. This one, I think, is about 125 feet, if I can see that properly. And then here, this second viewpoint is to that building that faces South Rutherford again, and that is a much further distance away than Building C. This drawing here that you can see, well, you can't see until I zoom in. There we go. Much better. So that Building C, as you're looking, here's coming up the roadway over the Rutherford Bridge. You can see that Building A and its context and how it changes and is hidden by a portion of that massive retaining wall. And then really where you are when you're at the street level with the distance set back about 143 feet. And then the last one, here we go, is Building C. This would be directly across the street from Husky Truss. So Husky Truss sits back about 187 feet. Building C sits back about 110 feet at 48 feet in height. Husky Truss is about 26 feet. So again, that just gives context, and staff feels confident that with the setbacks provided and the heights of the buildings and the placement of those buildings, that it really better suits it. And then to show that a little bit more specifically, this is that rendering as you're standing at the top of the bridge on Rutherford with the buildings in the distance, and then this one below represents what you would see as you're coming westbound with Building C on the right and Husky Truss across the street. So really an idea as you're coming one way towards the development and the opposite direction. We appreciate all of the developers' work on trying to show that to you all so that we could get some level of comfort given the amount of square footage. As I mentioned in the staff report and staff comments, these are kind of the typical detail features for the building. We believe that the color palette is such to where there won't be bright colors, but because they have not selected the precise colors yet, we did include a staff comment just stating that it should be in line with what you visually see on the screen, and then some other small modifications, i.e. the main entry canopies being 4 feet deep, which is a little bit deeper, and then the top of the caps being a little bit taller because of the height of the building. You want to be able to see those specific changes. And then this just gives you an idea on the back side what you would see with those truck docks. And these are windows that are actually incorporated into them. And the plans call for a limited number of dock doors to start, and then also shows what they could have if they were to expand, depending on the user that ends up being the end user for the project. Again, on the back side, this just delineates some of those specifics. It does fall in line with having the materials as required by our design guidelines, the colors. From trash enclosures here, they proposed proposed locations. We did ask for them to add a note here that just states, depending on the end user, that they have some flexibility with that for staff to help determine that they meet the city's standards, so they wouldn't have to come back for a full site plan review. And again, here just shows the floor plan elevations for each of the buildings. So each page denotes with the key plan. This is the first building, Building A. What you would see facing what I'll say the CSX railroad tracks is this facade, and that's the most primary facade that would be visible. The secondary that would be visible is this one that's called out here as number 2, which again incorporates that office space. And then on the opposite side, staff has asked for a faux office facade, so that, because again, it's a key component that you would see from Rutherford. As you go towards the next building over, same kind of comments that we would be looking at. This primary one here would be what's facing South Rutherford. Originally, they just had kind of the 2 end caps and this potential center area for if there's additional office space. Staff has worked with them to add these elements here to help break down the building again through a little bit of color and massing. And then down to Building C, the only comment we had here, I think just because we were trying to get you the cleanest copy possible, this accidentally changed out to a faux office. Floor plans actually show this as being a real office, so we made comment to update that particular component. And then going down to the last building here, which you can see again is in the back of the project site, what would be facing the residential component. And then, of course, the tree preservation and buffer area would be this very long area that does not have any openings, so that you do not get any sound or any vehicular traffic back in these areas, so that it's the least impactful to the development adjacent. And so with that, staff, just make sure I've covered everything, big project. Looks like the project is in good order so long as they're subject to meeting all staff comments. And then after this consideration, we would be talking about their subsequent preliminary plat that's tied to the project.
Okay. A lot of hard work. What questions does anybody have?
Quick question on is this one of the business innovation nodes also in the future?
It is. However, they are not requesting a zone change, so it would be staying general industrial and heavy industrial zoning, which allows for distribution-type uses. But we have shared with the applicant that the city's push is to try to get things that are maybe higher generating incomes and manufacturing opportunities. But because of the underlying zoning district, and there's not a planned development tied with this or any change of zoning, it wouldn't necessarily be tied to the business innovation, is my understanding.
But it looks like from the building design that if it's split up, it could actually fit that.
It can, yes. And I think that's the main thing, and I believe their representatives are here, and they can speak to the specifics about what they have in mind. They do build in other areas, and so they're using a lot of the models that they've applied to those other areas. So I'm sure they would be happy to explain that a little bit more if you would like that, Mr. Russell.
Any other questions on that?
Yeah, I'm good with it.
I'm good.
And Mr. Taylor's here as well, if you have any questions about the site design.
Okay. Just a couple. So it looks like, and it could be answered by either one, we're going with 2 drives instead of 1 now, so it's one right across from Husky Trust and the other drive?
Yes, sir. And then we've also made a stub to the east into, I call it the Hoover property, so that public road that Ms. Smith mentioned earlier, we'll be able to connect into that because that aligns with Mr. Berryman's property to the south, which is about 300 acres of industrial. We already pretty well know that's going to have a signal at some point in the future, and so it seemed like a more appropriate place. We've got this dedicated as a public access easement on our eastern drive for that purpose.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is the Building A intended to take freight off of the railroad to be cross-docked or transloaded onto there?
So right now, none of our buildings would do that. In our previous discussions with CSX, this segment did not align with having an additional spur. They have been willing to do that on the opposite side of Rutherford for what Berryman owns. It has something to do with the direction of traffic. I don't pretend to be a railroad engineer, but I do know they have told us no on that previously here. And on the landscaping, we would actually be we'd make sure we had a type E buffer there. It is the city's most stringent buffer. And so whether that's through existing material or proposed material, we'll make sure we have that. And we do have a large separation between us and those homes next door. So I think we always say distance is the best buffer. So.
Yeah. Do you know about how far that is?
I would say it's several hundred feet. I don't know off the top of my head, but the floodway is quite wide right there, and we've got stream buffers, so we've got a lot of separation there.
So with the Type E, once it's grown up, it's going to be an easy shed over that.
It is. We actually think the existing trees that are there are we're not thinking we're going to have to supply any of that at the end of the day because there's so much vegetation back there today.
And just how tall is the building at the tallest point?
They are 50 feet at the tallest point. But I think one important thing is, it sounds like a lot of square footage, but it's broken up into 4 buildings. So it's not like it's not an Amazon. It's 1.1 million. They're much smaller than that. So it's going to attract a different clientele. And my client has used these same building sizes in other developments and has been able to attract more techie type oriented use.
Yeah, I think with the 50,000 square feet, if we pursue that business innovation customer, we'll be able to win some of those.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
There are none. I move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
I'll second.
Motion is second. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank y'all very much. Next, we have the Rutherford Warehouse Murphy property, and this is the preliminary plat for 4 lots on approximately 87.7 acres of land, zoned heavy industrial and general industrial, located along South Rutherford Boulevard. Distribution Realty Group developer. Ms. Smith.
As we mentioned, this is the partner to the prior item. This particular overall master plan shows the overall breakdown of that particular plat. The first one that's a little bit hard to see shows is like a flag lot where it comes through this drive access on the easterly border and then really splits everything north of that east-west driveway and goes all the way up to their section that is adjacent to other city properties. Excuse me. And then you'll notice Lytle Creek through there and some of the water facilities. On these particular plans, we do show a base flood elevation on each of those parcels, so anything that does happen to be within that 100-year floodplain will need to be built to above that base flood elevation in conformity with our current standards on that. The other thing that we wanted to more clearly show for y'all is the last page of this particular attachment, which again talks about that east street, and I think as Mr. Taylor had pointed out, provides a stub into the adjacent property. I know I'm almost there. There we go. So here's where you can see that far easterly street. So everything identified in this red would be a cross-access easement. And we've asked for them to call out, and it says for the benefit of the parcels 1 through 4 that are being created, and then this parcel 01, which is on the east side. And then you'll also notice this cross-access stub out that gets you far enough back into the site to where development on the adjacent property is easier to accomplish, and then it would provide for that future access stub to again tie back into Broad Street as future development projects come through. This particular one, the purpose will be to, of the plat, preliminary plat, is to provide all the necessary easements consistent with that integrated site plan. So we're actually calling this an integrated preliminary plat, which is a little bit different functionality-wise. It's really how they coordinate the construction of the improvement of the infrastructure for those projects. But with that, I think that this particular item is in good order so long as it's subject to all staff comments. And again, this preliminary plat would allow the working towards a final plat that would come back to you after they've provided all of the more specifics into the project. And Matt Taylor is available should you have any questions on the preliminary plat.
Okay. Any questions on the preliminary plat?
There are none. I'll move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank
Okay.
you, Commission.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Our next item, item F, is Riley, Section 1. It's a master plan and preliminary plat for 41 lots on 16.7 acres, zoned PRD, located along Highway 99. Patterson Company, LLC is the developer. Mr. Barbie, good afternoon.
Trying to get Mr. Barbie's version back up. Here we go.
Good afternoon, Chair Jones and members of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. The next item on your agenda today is Riley Section 1. This is a master plan and preliminary plat for 41 lots located along the southeastern portion of New Salem Highway. In review of this preliminary plat, the submittal is generally consistent with the zoning plan that was approved for this development. It is providing 2 access points to New Salem Highway. See if I can enlarge this. As well as both eastbound and westbound turn lanes to allow for efficient access both in and out of the development. They're also providing a neighborhood park labeled as Common Area 3 in this location here, as well as an irrigation system for the street trees that are going to be provided throughout the neighborhood. This plan is generally in good order, and staff would request that you make any approval subject to all staff comments. I'm available if you have any questions, and I believe Mr. Taylor is still here as well.
If there are none, I move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Easy enough. Next item is Cherry Blossoms Downs, preliminary plat for 52 lots on 10.1 acres, zoned PRD, located north of West Thompson Lane. BA Homes LLC is the developer. Welcome back, Mr. Aguilera. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Chair Jones. This last item for our plats and plans portion of our agenda is the Cherry Blossom Downs preliminary plat. This preliminary plat is generally consistent with the Planned Residential Development Program book that was heard back in January 18th, 2023, and the elements that have been denoted. The main ones that we just wanted to communicate are, of course, the right-of-way portion of the preliminary plat that talks there with West Thompson Lane. That is slated to be improved and widened from a 2-lane roadway to a 5-lane roadway. So staff worked with the development team, engineering team, to make sure that those improvements were denoted correctly and that the right-of-way dedication was not going to be in conflict with the elements, the common area detention elements at along the front of the subdivision. There are 52 lots proposed to be with this subdivision. Minimum lot size 5,200 square feet. Each complying with the exception of 2 lots located right here at the northern portion of the subdivision. All the lots will be compliant with the 4 vehicles in the driveway, allowing them to have sufficient space for that, with two spaces inside the garage for those. Lot 27 and Lot 28 are the only exceptions to that requirement. That is consistent with the program book that was approved by you all back in January 2023. Also communicated, one big point that was also communicated between the public and Planning Commission was the desire for landscaping screening along the western portion between this neighborhood and the adjacent neighborhood. As you can see here, there is a 10-foot landscape easement type A buffer that has been included and dedicated with this subdivision, so that is also consistent with the program book that was approved by you all. Also included with this subdivision that is consistent with the program book is the 3 common areas. Obviously, there, as I stated, there is 2 in the front for detention purposes to handle that drainage system and those drainage elements that is being proposed with this subdivision, as well as the one near the end of the subdivision, the common area that holds the common area amenities such as the cornhole, fire pit, pavilion, etc. There are several comments for the engineering team, most of which are just mostly informational for the next steps, and just a few engineering key comments just to make sure that they have the consistent information for staff to make the adequate review and approval for this later on when they go through construction plan. But beyond that, there are no major outstanding concerns with this. Staff recommends that if the Planning Commission does approve this, that they make it subject to all staff comments. I'm here if you have any questions, and then Matt Taylor is also here with SCC.
Okay. Any questions regarding this preliminary plat?
If there are none, I'll move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And just to get on the record as well, there were specific landscaping requirements, as Mr. Aguilera mentioned, along the shared property line with Tuscany. And so if you wouldn't mind making part of your motion, subject to all the requirements in the pattern book, just to memorialize that regarding the buffer along that property line.
I'll include that in my motion.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Would you like another vote on that? All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, next we have new business. First item is a zoning application for approximately 34.2 acres located west of Memorial Boulevard to be rezoned from RS-15 to PRD. This is Northridge Park PRD. Brightland Homes is the applicant. Mr. Blomley, you taking this one?
I will take that one as well. So this is a resubmittal of the PRD rezoning request located directly to the west of the Family Worship Center, west of Memorial Boulevard. It's the Patton and Melton property that abuts Regency Park, Regency Estates, and Palmer subdivisions. This property, as I'm sure you'll all recall, was before you and the City Council several months ago for a single-family subdivision, for rezoning for a single-family subdivision named Northridge Park. That was denied at council, and so the applicant worked with staff on attempting to address some of the concerns that were expressed during the entire process, the Planning Commission and the City Council, and so they have resubmitted a brand new application in an attempt to address those concerns that were expressed. Mr. Pandorf with Huddleston Steel will go through the revised plan in just a moment, but I did want to hit some of the highlights. They have decreased the density from 96 single-family residential lots to 85 single-family residential lots. The previous plan had a mixture of 10,000 and 12,000 square foot minimum lot sizes. In the current plan, they are showing a minimum of 12,000 square foot lot size for all lots in the subdivision. And just as a point of reference, the existing zoning is RS-15, so they would be going from a minimum 15,000 square foot lot size to minimum 12,000 square foot lot size. One of the concerns that was expressed during the public hearings was that the connections back to Memorial Boulevard, especially as it related to Banner Drive, was too direct, and the folks who lived on Banner Drive expressed concerns that it would encourage cut-through traffic to their street. And I think one of the good things about this development is that it will create access for these existing neighborhoods and for this development to a signalized intersection at the Osborne Lane Memorial Boulevard intersection. And that signalized intersection is already signalized, and this would add a fourth leg to that intersection. And the developers would be required on the front end to construct that public street back to that signalized intersection. And so it would create really good connectivity with the 5 existing street stubs into this development, giving opportunities for traffic to get back to a signalized intersection for safe movements onto Memorial Boulevard. The closest access point onto Memorial Boulevard to this location is at Regal Drive, which is not currently signalized, and lefts can be a little bit tricky out of there sometimes, so this would get people back to a safer turning movement. The plan does show all 5 street stubs stubbing into this development, or continuing into this development. However, the layout of the subdivision has been changed so that, especially with regards to Banner Drive, there are additional 90-degree turns to make it a little bit more circuitous and less direct to get back to the existing neighborhood, to kind of slow people down and still allow for that connectivity without making it a cut through at high speeds. The design team and the planning staff held a neighborhood meeting last Monday, the 12th, and I did not attend, but Mr. McKnight did attend, and he indicated that there were about 40 neighbors there, so it was a good turnout, and it was a good dialogue with the neighborhood. But we wanted to make sure that they were educated on the differences between the previous plan and this plan, and so they could understand why it was being brought back because of the changes that were being made. So I'll invite Mr. Pandorf here in a moment to give you some more detail on the proposed development. But if you concur, we would recommend that you schedule a public hearing for this rezoning request for the July 12th Planning Commission meeting. And just as a reminder, because of the July 4th holiday, the evening Planning Commission meeting in July is being pushed back to, or has been pushed back to the July 12th meeting, to July 12th, the second Wednesday in July. And Mr. Pandorf, would you, or Mr. Roundtree, I didn't see you back there. Mr. Roundtree and Mr. Pandorf are here.
Thank you, Matthew. Chairman Jones, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Townley, Huddleston Steel Engineering. Thank you for the opportunity to get before you today to walk you through Northridge. And as Matthew mentioned, we received the unanimous approval through Planning Commission on the first round. However, when we got to City Council, there was a lot of things that had to be worked through. So I'll walk you through the changes, as Matthew mentioned, and kind of highlight them. When we met with the neighbors, the biggest thing we're running into on this project, we think it's a fantastic project. Guillen Homes has been changed to Brightland Homes now. The developer, they've hung in there through this process. They've done everything we've asked them to do. They reduced the quantity of homes. They increased the lot sizes to a minimum of 12,000 square feet. They work with us on road alignment. They wanted to make sure, to the best possible, they're listening to the neighbors' concerns. Originally, we had the amenity center on the back portion of the property. We now have it on the front portion of the property. So I just kind of want to walk you through it. As Matthew mentioned, originally, if you look to the right, the road coming in to the subdivision, that's the Osborne Lane connection. So Guillen Homes is committed to developing that road section, which is now a 60-foot wide right-of-way coming through, and providing the traffic light at Osborne. So folks will be coming in off of Memorial into this subdivision, but they'll also be going through all kinds of different routes. What we've run into is it's kind of philosophical, really, more than anything. We had our neighborhood meeting a few weeks ago, as Matthew mentioned, and the same concerns were still brought up from the neighborhood as far as, do all the stub streets have to connect, and why? And then when we put the amenity center towards the front of the property, which is up against the commercial, we thought that was a good thing. But now they're saying, well, everyone's going to cut through on Amber to get to the amenity center. So there's a lot of speculation about how people are going to circulate through the property. But all I can say is our engineer, Chris McGuire, on this one made it as difficult as possible to get through this neighborhood. So we feel like by taking any sort of real obvious through street action, we feel like we've alleviated some of the through components, the whole, the drag strip component. We also, on the 3-lane section that's coming off of Osborne, we've added a median there to create a traffic calming component. We feel like by bringing the signage to the amenity center to the front of the subdivision, we're actually kind of slowing people down. This is a subdivision. This is not a cut through. So that was a big part of the changes. The other part was we've always come back with a certain percentage of homes that would be frontage. The developer is out of Dallas. all they do is the front entry homes in Dallas. So originally we came back with like 60% front entry or side entry, and then 40 front entry. Then we came back, and we're literally the last time we were literally about 90% side entry and 10% front entry. But now we're all side entry. So as a result, the lots got a little wider in order to accommodate that. So we feel like we've met the expectations with the quality construction. We feel like the lots have gotten wider to allow for all side entry garages. We rerouted all the circulation internally to make sure it wasn't a cut-through possibility. We've met with the neighbors on 2 different occasions. Drainage is a major concern. There's 2 neighbors that have specific drainage problems, very localized to their site. So we told them that we can't guarantee it, but in the process, typically with site plans, when we do that grading plan, we can alleviate some problems that happen with drainage. So we feel like we can address the drainage concerns that they have. It's just there's some history there, so they're just trying to trust us on that. And as far as the stub streets, we're still not convinced that's not going to be a point of contention when it goes to public hearing. How many is too many? Do they all need to connect? We're under the impression that by connecting all the stub streets, it just dissipates the traffic that much more. When you alleviate one, it just changes the traffic patterns. We know that interconnectivity between subdivisions is important to the city. At our neighborhood meeting, we said it's important from an emergency standpoint to make sure you can access the subdivision from different routes, but also really just to disperse the traffic is really an ultimate goal of why we're connecting all the stubs. So with that in mind, it's really the same plan you saw before with tweaks, but all the tweaks were significant in response to the concerns we heard from City Council, from concerns we've heard with the neighbors, and really trying to figure out exactly where we stand from a city planning standpoint on making sure all the stub streets connect. And even Osborne, there's some strong opinions on whether that Osborne should come through to the subdivision at all. The developer believes that Osborne connection is very important for them from a marketing standpoint, so people can get to their subdivision from Memorial. However, that's come into question as well. So we're here hopefully to move forward to Planning Commission. We're excited about presenting the full pattern book at Planning Commission, but I wanted you to be aware that these are some of the issues that are still outstanding that we think that we're going to have to weigh in on whenever the public comes forward, if that makes sense to you all. I'm available for any questions you may have. Ian Gerald's here from Huddleston Steel representing engineering as well. Mr. McGuire's on vacation, but I can probably answer any engineering questions as well.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rounty. Questions?
Were there many concerns with, I know when it came through council, a lot of people that had had concerns that it was going down to RS10. So now with RS12, were there still concerns with the smaller lots?
Sean, they were. Well, we're trying to help them understand that if it's RS15, it's still going to be developed, and there's still going to be It's the problem we're having is it's almost like it's all or nothing, right. And we're trying to coach them through that. This is really a tremendous home product. As far as these homes are going to start at $700,000, or large homes starting 2,400 square feet. So we're telling them this is a really nice subdivision. However, it's just the idea of something happening in their neighborhood that's been really a challenge for them. So yeah, there's still some questions about why can't it just be RS15? And we say, well, if it's RS15, you're probably going to lose out on the quality of the home. You're going to lose out on some of the control architecturally. You'll lose out on a lot of the input we've had from the back and forth with the neighborhood meetings. So I think they're coming around, Sean, but they're not quite there.
I really appreciate all the work on the connectivity and slowing down the racetrack stuff. I mean, I live in the area, and I would much rather go to Regal to come back to Regency Park than drive through this to cut through. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think there's a balance of when that subdivision was built and the growth of the city then versus now, and we have to be good fiduciaries of what we're trying to do, which is handle the growth. I think the RS12 is a good compromise. We're not going heavy density,
right?
But it's a step down. The one question I have, I know there was a lot of comments on going on to the first, coming from Osborne Lane, turning left, and going on to that substandard road. Was there any comments in the meeting on that?
we don't really, I don't know if this roads would be considered current city standards. The roads are not necessarily substandard, but they have bar ditches in them, so they have a perception of being fairly narrow. And all it takes is one car in the neighborhood to park out in someone's front yard, and all of a sudden people are having to divert their walking. There's a lot of walking in the adjacent neighborhoods, and that's the real threat, that they feel like this added traffic, really, they believe it's all going towards Haynes. That's really their primary concern, that it's all going out Amber Drive, out to Haynes Drive, and then getting on to Broad and getting on to 840. The traffic study doesn't say that necessarily. The traffic study says by keeping all the access points open, we're dissipating the traffic that's being generated by this neighborhood. We also came into some of the price point, who's going to occupy these buildings. It's going to be a heavy child neighborhood. Is it young families? And more than likely at this price point, it's not going to be young families. So the impact on the school, there's just been a lot of speculation about who's going to live here and where they're going to drive to. There's even been speculation that a lot of these folks will work from home. So we know that each of these homes will have cars that were accounted for in the traffic study. We feel like by opening up all the access points, it allows that possibility. And we know that, to your point, Warren, every road, I would say every road coming into the subdivision would be considered substandard from today's standards, just because of the nature of the way the roads look, and primarily because they feel narrow because there's barges on both sides for drainage. Just an older neighborhood, really.
In Ms. Green's staff report, she addressed the roadway widths of the existing streets that are stubbed into the property. They have varying pavement widths. So our current street specs require 24 feet of pavement width. Right now, the Tower Street stub has 24 feet of pavement width, so it will match that. Banner and the unnamed street coming off of Regal Drive both have 36-foot pavement width. So it would actually be necking down a little bit to this development. Archer and Amber to the south are a little bit narrower, but not much. Amber is a 22-foot wide pavement width, and Archer is a 21-foot wide pavement width. So our current, as I mentioned, these streets will be 24 feet wide. So it'll transition to that narrower street, but it's only narrower to the south by about 2 or 3 feet than our current standard.
Thank you.
Are there sidewalks on both sides of the road in this entire development?
There are.
And see, now I see it. I found it. Finally. I've been looking. Sorry. I apologize. What other questions or comments? I agree that, like everybody says, they seem to be slightly minor, but they're really major improvements, I believe, to this plan. So thanks to our council and to the developers for working with us on that.
I liked the last plan, and this one to me is better than the
Even
last
better,
one. So
yeah.
I'll move to schedule the public hearing.
For July 12th.
July 12th.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you all. Our next item is a zoning application for approximately 16.5 acres located along Veterans Parkway to be rezoned from CH to PRD, approximately 12.8 acres, and PCD, approximately 3.7 acres. Cornerstone Development, LLC, is the applicant. Is Ms. Rush taking this one?
I will go ahead and go over this. So this is property that is on the east side of, let's see. It is on the east side of Veterans Parkway, north of Franklin Road. It is the area that you'll see outlined in the dashed line here. It's currently zoned commercial highway. It's a large, deep commercial parcel. You may recall that back in, I think, 2020, Mr. Taylor and his team made a request for rezoning of this property to PRD for a townhome development, and I believe that was deferred at the Planning Commission. They are back with a different plan this time, and so it's a request to not only PRD, but to PCD as well. And here is the concept plan. So the area in yellow is the proposed PRD, and the area in orange is the proposed PCD. And so even though the property is already zoned commercial highway, which would permit commercial uses by right, since the applicant is requesting for a rezoning for the back portion to PRD, we urge them to also request rezoning for the remaining commercial land to PCD, so that the Planning Commission and the City Council would have guarantees of the quality and of the uses. And so in the pattern book, those uses are outlined, and there is a proposed layout for the commercial development to the rear of the existing veterinary hospital. So, Ms. Rush, would you like to?
Where'd you leave off? Sorry. Take it from the top?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all. So this is Sullivan's Retreat. It is 16.46 acres located along the east side of Veterans Parkway and north of Franklin, north of the Kroger Shopping Center. It's a request for rezoning from CH to PRD and PCD for Sullivan's Retreat. The PRD portion is 80 single-family attached units, and the PCD portion is for 4 buildings, commercial buildings, totaling approximately 23,500 square feet. You may recall, some of you, that back in October 2020, Sullivan's Retreat came before you for rezoning to residential only. It was for a PRD for 89 units. There was no commercial component. Staff had concerns about that because we do see along Veterans Parkway developing as a commercial corridor. We also had some concerns about some of the design elements, as well as I think there was sewer, also some issues at that time. So in the last 2.5 years, the developer has been working with staff and working on significant revisions to this proposal. One of the significant components of the development is that there are 2 pedestrian promenades that connect the residential portion to the commercial portion. And you kind of see them where the trees go up through the middle of the property. Those promenades are to really create that interconnectivity between the commercial and the residential. In the 3 buildings, or the 4 buildings that are in the commercial orange area, there's also pedestrian corridors there that are heavily landscaped, seating benches, planter areas where the pedestrians are really, again, just engaging that particular space. Between the residential and those buildings is the commercial parking lot area. The other parcel that is commercial, the remnant, is actually right up against the Veterans Parkway, and that would develop probably something similar to what is already developing along Veterans. To the south, there's a vet clinic, and so they're foreseeing something that may be a drive-through restaurant. Where the properties that are the interior commercial that obviously would not have drive-through restaurants because, again, it's that pedestrian connectivity, but they would have restaurants where you would have outdoor dining or uses that would support that as well. There is a secondary access that connects over to the signalized light, so there is a private road that runs along the backside of the commercial. All the streets are in the residential portion are private, private roads, private alleys. The residential units have rear entry garages, and they front out to the streets. This does not have a trash compactor, so these would have individualized collection by a trash vehicle. A hauler would come and collect from that site. The one thing I did want to bring up is that, this is the workshop portion of it, and we are asking for a public hearing to be scheduled. They do have a list of exceptions that are asking for. So if you go to page 4 of the staff report, there are 6 exceptions from the residential portion. The first one is the western portion of the PRD along the commercial parking lot would not have a planting yard, and this is an exception to reduce the planting yard from 10 feet to 0. And that is because, again, they're trying to create those pedestrian promenades as that landscaped link, and so it was by design on purpose that they would have the interface between the residential and the commercial. The second exception requested is that the solid waste be handled via trash carts and a private hauler instead of the required trash compactor when you're proposing 75 or more units. The third request is the internal front and secondary front setbacks for townhomes be reduced to 5 feet from the back of the sidewalks. Again, that's because of the more urban type of character of this development. And again, requesting the internal side setbacks of the townhomes be reduced from 5 feet to 3 along the alleyways. Number 5 is a request to an exception to allow the private roads to have a minimum horizontal turn radius of 100 feet. To be quite honest, I don't know if we have studied that in terms of this site plan design. Matt Taylor is very familiar with our roads, so I do have a lot of trust and faith in him, but I do feel like our engineers on staff would need to weigh in on that particular request. And then the 6th request is for an exception for the 2-car garage dimensions. So in our zoning ordinance, if you all recall, we do have very specific dimensions that are interior when you're using inside of the garage for parking, and they are asking for a reduction in that as indicated under number 6. There's also 2 exceptions in the PCD portion for the commercial, but those also relate to the setbacks and the buffer, actually the buffer between the residential and the commercial, that the planting yard be reduced from 10 feet to 0, and that a request to the exception to the required buffer along the eastern side of the PCD. The last thing I wanted to bring up is that, subject to the future land use map, we've just adopted our new land use map, and it does designate this as auto urban residential and neighborhood commercial. So it does pretty much align with what the zoning is that we're asking for, because we worked with them, they worked with us, and that's kind of how the map ended up for this property. I did want to bring to your attention, though, that it does not comply with what the AUR criteria is for development. So as part of our future land use map update, we did have some discussion and decided to have some sort of criteria for the AUR where a specific amount of units could be townhomes and a specific amount of the square footage or acreage could be townhomes. And that it does not comply with. We felt that since they had started this process 2.5 years ago under our old future land use map, that this was something that could be taken into consideration and maybe an opportunity to deviate for the future land use map for that reason. So for now, staff is asking that the Planning Commission discuss those items, provide some guidance if you have any, and that set the public hearing for July 12th. Matt Taylor is the representative for the applicant, and I'm not sure if Mr. Justin is going to represent Justin. Justin's better half, Mr. Harney, is here in the audience as well that can answer questions. Thank you very much.
I'm just going to say that I would have to think about the garage exceptions that are being requested, just because we seem to have a lot of trouble with that, but I'm willing to look at it. And the trash carts, I mean, I guess, do we feel like that the I realize that it's only 80 units, and we require it if it's more than 75, so it's not like we're much off, but, just want to make sure that would be something that isn't going to turn into an issue, since we seem to be having some trouble with that as well. Just my initial thoughts on some of those exceptions.
Ms. Jones sorry, Mr. Taylor, just regarding the solid waste management.
Yes, sir.
We're actually examining right now our regulations for solid waste management. And for developments like this, we as staff are open to alternatives. And I think it's something that we are happy to entertain dialogue with applicants on, because we've heard concerns from developers in the past about maintenance issues with compactors and just general issues with compactors, with them being central and not convenient to a lot of the residents. So it's the kind of thing that while we don't know if the solution that they presented is the ideal solution, it's something that we're open to discussing for planned development applications. And
Agreed. If it's not working, let's work on some other alternatives. So,
Matt Taylor from SEC. I'll start with the trash. I think this project's size, as far as number of units, is very comparable to Brookwood Point that we did over off of North Tennessee, and there we used all private carts as well. And so I think I've not heard any complaints from my client or any of his buyers as a result of that. I have not necessarily driven through that recently in the last 6 months, but I think that'd be a good one from a size perspective to compare to.
Okay.
On the garage, I think on the one car, I think we're fully compliant. On the two car, we're about 5 inches shy on one of our dimensions. And really, my client is proposing an alternative way to comply with that, because the way I understood it, whenever we were doing those minimum sizes on the garages, it was to account for things like your trash can and your water heater in there. And so my client has really, if you look at, so if you look at the two car, he's got, if you look at the straight area, he's got way more area. So he's got areas over to the side that are available for that storage. It just doesn't have that 1 5-inch dimension. So he's really providing alternative places for that storage to occur instead of just that single 5-inch dimension. So I think it meets the spirit in my mind, just in an alternative method.
I see the 5-inch is very different from what I was thinking, 5 feet. So yeah, big deal. And as long as like a trash cart can get past the car to get over into that little storage area in there, is that
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Or is it coming from the other direction?
No, these will do that. He's actually building the same footprint in a couple of, at least one other development over off of Joe B. Jackson and Manchester Highway. And he's bringing that over here, except for at Joe B. Jackson, it's a front entry product. Here he's made it a rear entry product, but all the dimensions are still the same. He's really just taken that front facade and moved it to the other. I drive by there every day, and it appears to be pretty successful.
I would agree.
Right. The general look, I like the facade, everything looks really nice. So we're looking, who's got other questions or comments?
I think the only other question was the 100-foot radius.
So I think the places that those are right here and right here. And really, trash trucks and fire can all get around that. And so I think that 230 goes back to, the 230 in the, for a public street goes back to something in the Green Book or the AASHTO requirements. And here we were trying to slow people down with those little sharper turns and with the buildings closer to the street. And it seemed like the private street would allow us to achieve that a little better. but it still allows trash and fire, everybody to still get around through there very easily. I think we included templates. I don't know if they're in the book or if they were separate exhibits, but we did provide those back to staff.
But for trash, you're using private hauler?
Excuse me?
For trash, you are using private hauler?
Yes, sir.
So,
But I usually model the trucks in the same fashion.
Understood.
Any other questions?
I move to set the public hearing for July the 12th.
I'll second.
Motion and second. All in favor state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you all. Next, item C is a zoning application for approximately 0.64 acres located along East Vine Street to be rezoned from RS8 and CCO to PRD and CCO, East Vine Manor PRD at 520 Vine Street. LLC is the applicant. Ms. Smith.
Good afternoon again. This particular project, again, is similar. It's our first initial introduction, and really are looking at setting a public hearing for this particular one, but this one is adjacent to, if you look at the map here, there's an existing PRD that was built to the east of the existing property. Existing property is RS8. It might be a little difficult to tell, but there is also RS8 adjacent here at the corner. This is RM16 on these lots, and then RM16 along the south for a little bit better context of the project site. Project site is proposing 7 attached single-family dwellings. You'll notice the front 2 are 2 units that are made to look like a manor, hence East Vine Manor. All of them, the front ones have a rear-loaded garage, whereas the ones sitting in the back of the property are front-loaded garage products. There you can see that zoning that I was mentioning of RS8 on the one side and multifamily on the other ones. As Ms. Rush mentioned, we now have our newly adopted land use plan, and so you'll start seeing these excerpts in our plan books to show how they're designated. And for this particular project, it's designated, double check, not get it confused with the other one, mixed form. Yes, mixed form housing. And so you'll notice that that is generally compatible with our RS10, RS8, RS6. All of our RSA districts, our RD districts, and PRD. And so when we were looking at that particular project, we looked at compatibility. The mixed form housing talks about architectural plans to be compatible with the adjacent neighborhood and to look like single-family detached residential, which we believe is achieved on that front unit. On this particular project, you'll notice they're proposing a permeable paver type of a driveway parking areas. There are 3 parking stalls per unit, one that is and I'm glad to see this new exhibit that you'll see up on the screen that shows where are the cars parked for the individual homes. So there's 3 per unit, and then there are 2 guest parking spots as well. You'll also notice here they've shown trash cart storage within those garage units, HVAC locations, and then now we're starting to see some gang vault locations. In this particular instance, we may have to revisit before the public hearing, making sure that the gang vaults have adequate space to meet our city standards so that we're not coming back at a later time once they're already approved. As you'll notice in the red, the only exception that they're requesting here is that the front porches, i.e. stoops, shall be permitted to encroach into that front setback up to 7 feet. Our current zoning code actually allows a 5-foot encroachment into front yard setbacks for porches, chimneys, those kinds of architectural features. So they're just asking for the 2 additional feet. And then as far as density for the project site, they are looking with the 5 units and the 0.64 acres. It would equate to 7.81 units to the acre, which is in conformity with the RSA district. So they are not looking at a density bonus there, but just that encroachment in the front setback. As you can see by the drawings, again, trying to give it a massing to look like a single-family unit from the front of the property. And then as far as landscaping and private open space, again, a new, I didn't ask for this, but I really like the circulation plan that shows pedestrian access into the buildings with the red lines and the blue lines showing how the vehicles will access in and through the site. Each of the units has private open space of 50 square feet, which is the new set requirement. And additionally, they're providing formal open space as well through fire pit, pavilion, seating area, and a large green space at the back. The applicant's engineer is here should we have any questions. There are some minor items that we're working through in the program book that we anticipate cleaning up prior to public hearing, but we believe that the request of setting that hearing date for July 12th will be sufficient to get that information to y'all.
Would it be required to have access for a fire truck, or would a fire truck be on the road and be able to get to the rear units?
My understanding is it's when we get more than 150 feet in depth is when fire department needs to be able to circulate around. Okay. Otherwise, it's generally on the roadside, or they're just pulling straight in if there was something that was further into the site.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we set a public hearing? Concerns, issues, problems, or?
Does the current architecture on the plans match the North Highland study?
It does. So the North Highland study talks about looking like a single-family dwelling. And so again, when you're looking at that from, let me get to the front side, there you go. Okay. There's the front elevation. And so the architect, I think, designed this one specifically just for this project site to try to get a new product out there that adds varying roof lines, adds articulation so that you don't have a straight flat facade across the front.
Okay, I'm good.
Can we see the back one?
Sure can. Right here. This is the portion of the back that would be facing towards Vine Street, and then this is the back side of those back units, each one having their own porch and balconies.
So that looks different than, it's almost like the blueprint drawing. So I just wanted to make sure we had some variation on the facade, which it's a nice project.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
If there's nothing else, I'll move that we set a public hearing for July the 12th.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Good. And then item D is a zoning application for approximately 1.2 acres located along North Manny Avenue and Lee Street to be rezoned from OGR and CCO to PRD and CCO. Manny Estates PRD, and B&A Homes is again the applicant. Ms. Smith.
Good afternoon again. This particular PRD is actually 2 different components, and as you can see from the boundary map, it actually spans from North Manny Avenue all the way over to Lee Street and involves 5 parcels, 1, 2, 3, 4, yes, 5 parcels, 4 full parcels and a portion of a 5th parcel. It leaves alone the existing commercial units that are on the corner of the property, even though they are all owned by the applicant. In this particular area, this is part of the CCO, and the current underlying zone district is OGR, which we don't see too many of. Here you can see a little bit of a rendition from top side up looking along Manny Street. This is, I think, Cozy Cat, maybe? Sorry, Crying Cat. Crying doesn't sound good. I like cozy better. No, just kidding. With the 4 detached residential units that they're proposing along Manny, those units would have 3 detached, minimum 2-car garages. One of the plans actually has an attached 2-car garage, and all of the front units have adequate parking and guest parking. And you'll notice here in the background is a 3-unit attached single-family dwelling along Lee Street and 4 along the backside, which is very similar to some other ones that are on the north side of Lee Street. Again, looking from the front side, there are this area is also in our new general plan book. The drawing on the left is a little bit crude because we don't have the new GIS layers available yet, but we hope to have that incorporated into the program book as soon as they're available. But as you'll notice with the outline is a portion of the project is identified as North Highlands, the entire site, and then the portion that's along North Manny is also designated neighborhood compatible overlay. And then the map to the right actually is from the North Highlands plan, again with that front portion of Manny in single-family residential. The back portion of it is mixed residential neighborhood. So what we did ask the applicant to do is in the back of the program book, the compatibility chart actually splits out the single-family detached product from the regular townhome product. And in the original staff report, we had talked about the compatibility zone. Potentially for that single family, it might be more appropriate for an OGR, but once Matthew got back from vacation and we talked it over, we thought an RS4 is more appropriate because one, it's more in a more urban area, and again, it is a single-family detached product, which we believe will reduce the amount of exceptions in that particular area. Going through, so the site layout you can see here. We did recently, our current process is looking at doing a plat map. These 4 single family are looking at being on individual lots of record with shared drive approaches being where the boundary line is split between those 2. And then of course the townhome being an HPR type of a product. All of the single family is a Craftsman bungalow type style. And again, the one that you have with the attached garage, there we go, is this particular one where you see that attached garage at the back side of the unit. And there are actually 3 floor plans proposed for the 4 lots. So you'll only have one plan being repeated twice, and they're located kind of on the ends of each other. On the townhome product, this is designated, like I said, mixed residential neighborhood. I try not to confuse the land use versus the North Highlands plan. So, like I said, this is similar to one that is currently on Lee Street. I don't know what designation it has within the North Highlands study, but the North Highlands study does call any kind of multi-unit buildings to have a look to be like a single-family residential house. I have shared that with the applicant throughout the process. He would like to continue to have this particular product, which I think is maybe only different with the porches being added to the front features versus what's out in the field for Lee Street. The second item that came up as staff was reviewing the project was those projects along North Manny Street, that neighborhood compatible overlay we have not worked with before. And the biggest thing that it states is no significant change in the development type or pattern by reinforcing the existing physical conditions such as lot sizes, building setbacks, and avoiding excessive nonconformities. So translation to staff meant there shouldn't be too many exceptions in those zone districts. I think using RS8 initially was probably, we didn't give direction which comparative zone district. The RS4 would have the lots be more in conformity as far as the size of the lot. I think it's minimum 6,000 square foot lot sizes. The width of the lots would only be 38 feet versus an RS4 would be 40 feet. So it would still have an exception, but it's a much smaller one versus a standard RS8. And then really the question that staff started to ask is on the setbacks. In looking at the CCO district, it basically says whatever the average block face is, that's what they should build to, not minimum setback, but what they should build to, which is 19.5 feet. That I haven't had a chance to talk to the developer at length with, but it does look like there's enough room within that existing layout to accommodate 19.5 feet for that building setback, which I think then would be more in line with that particular policy. So with those two things that staff would like to work with the applicant on and further refine the program book between now and the public hearing, I believe that those things can be addressed in that time frame. Mr. Burns may want to address, or Planning Commission may want to offer some input in regards to the front elevation for townhomes. Staff's just reviewing, here's what the policy says, and bring that forward for you to review and look at. But otherwise, I think that it would be appropriate and ready for a public hearing to be set for the July 12th date. And with that, if the applicant has anything that they would like to add, I think Clyde has a slideshow which covers many of the things here, but I know because we're just setting the public hearing, we try to give a very broad brush. And I know you've had lots of items today.
Questions or further comments? Do you have enough information?
Don't really like how the it's multifamily on one half and single family, but I wonder if they would consider doing that in a way where it's duplexes that look like single family homes instead of the buildings. It's kind of like you want the exemption, PRD, but still like taking advantage of every opportunity for density.
Thinking just on the Lee Street side, Mr. Prince, is that what you're talking about?
My name is Brian Burns with BA Homes. I don't know if I understood your question, but I'll try to answer it. I think you're wanting to, we built this same exact building complex literally about 100 feet down on Lee Street. Lee Street's a rough street. In my personal opinion, I think it just looks better to have each individual unit to look like its own individual unit. And it's really hard to take a threeplex and make it look like the twoplex you've seen on Vine Street, which was right beside my project there too. I'd prefer to keep them this design for aesthetics for me. I just think it looks better personally. as far as the reason we did the single-family on Manny, I just think Manny's a much nicer street. And most of those houses were old Sears and Roebuck houses that were built in the 20s and 30s. Or so that's where the design for those plans come from. So I thought that would blend in with the Manny homes.
Only because we've been working on the new long-term plans for the city, and I think even though you might be right, might look better now, but in the future, I think the hope is that everything around there gets kind of brought up, but
It's just not there yet, though.
Yeah.
I got appraisers that want him to go over there and appraise the houses. It's that rough. I don't mean that to be funny, it just is.
Yeah. One's a fourplex also?
The one in the back is a fourplex. The project gosh, you could hit a pitching wedge to it. The project I did right beside it is his exact plan, and I thought it turned out nice. Everybody seemed to give me good praises on the way it turned out. It was one I did with John Jones. I tend to think this will look better because I got a better color scheme, I think, for this one. I think the houses on the front will look great. I think they'll blend in with I redid the old house on Manny years ago, the blue one that's in the book there, so.
Real quick. And just for clarification, the drawing on the left is a rendering of the threeplex that's facing Lee Street. The ones on the right, those are existing. So those are the ones that are built that Brian's referring to that are right down the street. So just want to make sure that was clear.
And then what they did do is, and Brian will tell you, I tried not to beat him down too bad, but he did want more density on the lot, and really looking at the North Highland study with that mixed residential neighborhood, they talk about buildings not exceeding more than 4 units in a building. So that back building, instead of it being a 5-plex, and not only that, but by keeping it to 7 units, they do provide individual outside 50 square feet of private open space instead of that formal open space. So those two components make this a little bit different than some of the other PRDs we've seen in the past that would have required formal open space previously. But in this small of only 7 units does not trigger that formal open space necessarily.
Not that we couldn't schedule a hearing, but, I don't know. See what people have to say about it at a hearing. Okay with that.
Any other comments or questions before we schedule a public hearing?
I'll make a comment kind of agreeing with Mr. Burns. This would be a major improvement on Lee Street, so I agree with that. I would like to kind of stick with the North Highland study as far as architecture goes. But yeah, it would be a major improvement on Lee Street. I'll move for setting public hearing on July 12th.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Next, staff reports and other business. We have at least 2 items that we know of, and they're both mandatory referrals. The first one is a mandatory referral to consider the abandonment of a sanitary sewer easement and the dedication of a sanitary sewer easement on properties located southeast of Racket Club Drive, Huddleston Steel Engineering, Inc., on behalf of Brian Burns, applicant.
Apparently, Mr. Burns didn't care enough about this one to stay.
Forgot that he would be part of this one, too.
Good afternoon again. Chair Jones and members of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. Before you this afternoon is a mandatory referral request to abandon 2 sanitary sewer easements, and then following that is to dedicate 1 40-foot sanitary sewer easement. The reason behind this abandonment and adoption is the proposed sewer line that was to go in the existing sewer easement here has been realigned to go in this area now, which will require a new easement, leaving the old easement not needed. This request has gone before the Water Resources staff. They agree with the abandonment request, and it was also approved by the Water Resources Board on May 24th, 2023. Staff requests that if you do decide to approve this request, that we would like you to make it subject to the following conditions that are listed in your staff report. Matthew, do I need to read those, or?
They're pretty standard. If you'd like Mr. Barbie to read them, that's fine. If you'd like to.
Go over those if you think it's necessary.
Subject to staff comments to cover it.
Yes, it will.
I believe so.
All the legal documents, yeah, we got it.
I thought we could try to stretch it out to 3 hours if y'all wanted to.
I don't have.
That doesn't have any caffeine in it, Mr. Russell.
I move for approval subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Should have denied it since Brian's not here.
Yeah. Our next one, mandatory referral to consider the abandonment of a portion of a water line easement at 2540 Burgess Street. Mr. Jamie A. Guzman is the applicant. Mr. Barbie?
Yes, ma'am. Again, this is to abandon a 10-foot wide section of a 20-foot easement located on Mr. Guzman's property. The current easement is not occupied by any infrastructure, and our Water Resources Department has stated that they do not foresee any future need for this easement. It currently encumbers Mr. Guzman's property and prevents the legal use of his property. Therefore, we are asking for this easement to be abandoned. Water Resources staff, again, has agreed with this easement abandonment request, and it was also approved by the Murfreesboro Water Resources Board on the May 24th, 2023 regular meeting. We would also request that if this is approved, that it's made subject to all staff comments.
Okay, and just to confirm, we're talking about abandoning a 10-foot portion.
That's
of this
correct.
easement.
There is a 20-foot easement in this area. If you can, on the screen here in front of you, this green line represents the 10-foot wide portion that is on Mr. Guzman's property. There is an additional 10 feet of easement that is located to the property to the east.
Okay.
It is not a part of this request.
Okay.
Water Resources indicated that they would consider the abandonment of the rest of it if the adjacent property owner filed a request with them.
So there's not even anything over on that side either? Okay.
Can we go ahead and contact the adjacent property owner to do it all at once?
It would have to go back to the Water Resources Board. I asked the Water Resources Department about that, and because it's already been to the Water Resources Board, it will delay this moving forward if it has to go back. And there's a building encroachment that was inadvertently built into that easement that we're trying to clean up right now.
Gotcha. All right, understand.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Motion and second. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And did that have to state subject to all staff comments? If we need it, it's there. If we don't?
Wouldn't hurt.
Good.
Absolutely, that's what my motion said.
Yeah. I thought so. I thought I heard that. Okay. We're all good. Any other staff reports or other business today?
Just a reminder, as I mentioned earlier, that our July meeting will be on the second Wednesday, which will be July 12th instead of July the 5th. And also, the year's half over with, and I don't believe that I've sent y'all any continuing ed opportunities yet. We have 6 months left, so we'll be working on that in the coming weeks to get y'all some continuing education opportunities, and that's all I have.
I knew something was missing in my life.
Yeah, right.
All right. If there is no other business, we stand adjourned.